Morning everyone, welcome back to my channel. So it is the beginning of May and I thought I would do a quick little garden tour video today to show you what we have going on in our Zone 3 garden and to also introduce you to our new garden space because we recently moved in the fall. So this is a brand new garden this year. So let's see what we have got going on. So obviously the space that I'm most excited to show you is our new vegetable garden. So I'm just going to flip this around here. Hopefully you can see that, but this is our new vegetable space. It is around 4,200 square feet, plus a little bit extra. There's a raspberry patch just over there that we'll get to in a second, but it's a very large garden. It's about 3 times bigger than the garden at our last house. So we've been slowly working on making this garden space. You can see that we've laid down wood chips. This is all within the last week. We started this last weekend. So we spaced out some posts with strings to kind of make up our beds, and then we've put wood chips in the walking paths. This garden, or the soil here, is very heavy in clay. So we needed something that we could walk on because as soon as it rains, this whole garden space becomes like quicksand. So everything gets bogged up in mud. Everything gets it's just terrible. So we really needed to put a space that we'd be able to walk in if it does rain. So our boots and stuff and our wheelbarrows don't get completely caked up in mud. I've also, in the last few weeks, have been working on these raised garden beds. We can walk over there to get a better look. So these are our new garden beds. So they're L-shaped. The long sides are 8 feet. The short sides are 4 feet. There's 4 of them. And then this middle space here, we're hoping to have like a picnic table and a sitting area so that we'll have somewhere nice to sit in the garden. I did not have a sitting area at my last house, and that's something I definitely wanted for this place because it was so often that I just wanted to sit in the garden to enjoy it, but I wasn't able to because I didn't have a space for it. So these beds here that I built are spruce beds. They're 8 feet by 4 feet and they're in an L shape. The spruce was burnt using a propane torch. I can add a video here. This is a traditional Japanese technique called shusugi-ban or yakisugi, and it is a way to help preserve wood. It's traditionally used using Japanese cedar, but cedar was not in my budget this year, so these beds are spruce. And I don't know how well this technique is going to work with spruce because spruce is not as rot resistant as cedar is. But even if it doesn't help with rot resistance in any way, the beds just look so nice. And especially up against, if I can turn this, up against the wood mulch, they just really pop. And once they're filled with plants, I think they're going to look absolutely beautiful. So even if it doesn't help with rot resistance, it looks great, which is, to me, equally as important. So this space here has all of our onions. We recently filled this and planted everything last weekend. So there's probably about like 100 onion seedlings that we started in January, February this year. And then in those, you can kind of see the rows there. Those are some sets because I just wanted to see what does better. Is it worth starting the onions from seed or is it better starting them from sets? So I wanted to try that out myself. So I have a few sets there, but these are all the seedlings that you can see here. And in the back, I have some shallots and some leeks as well. So this bed is all kind of in the allium family. This back bed here, as you can see, has not been filled yet. I've filled it with some logs and sticks. We're gonna go the hugelkultur method of filling our beds just to save some money on soil. So I have sticks and logs in there right now. I'll also fill it up with some leaves. And then we're going to fill it up with some 4-part or 4-way garden mix that we've got from one of our local soil places. This back bed hasn't been filled as well, but you can see that there's sticks in there. So the goal for this weekend is to fill both of these last beds, and then my strawberries and asparagus will be going in both of these beds. And I just heard from the place that I ordered the strawberries and the asparagus from that they are ready to pick up. So hopefully those beds will be done in the week and then we can get them planted right away. So I have dinosaur kale in the corners of the bed, and then there are, these two are broccolini. So these two there, and then these two are Taiwan cabbage. There's a row of bok choy on the side there, some cilantro, some lettuce up at the front. So my original goal was to plant this entire bed with brassicas because I figured it would be one of the first beds to be ready in the spring, so I could get it ready, put like a little hoop over top of it to protect it from the flea beetles and the cabbage moth butterflies. But I was then thinking that this soil in the garden is so heavy in clay that I really needed to be careful about what I planted in the actual ground itself. So obviously I wanted to plant potatoes this year, and I didn't think that they would do very well in our really heavy clay soil in our in-ground garden. So then I was like, oh, maybe I should switch the potatoes for the brassicas, but I already had planted a few brassicas, which I just showed you. So I ended up planting the rest of this garden bed with potatoes. So it's a mix of potatoes, brassicas, lettuce, cilantro, and in the corners, I don't know if you can see that back corner there, that is some ranunculus, because same thing with the ranunculus. My goal was to plant it in a different part of the garden, which I'll get to in a second, but because our soil is so heavy in clay, I didn't think that the little corms, or tubers, whatever you want to call them, would do very well in our heavy clay soil. So then I was like, maybe I should plant some of them in the raised bed. So I have two planted in this bed. When I have the other two beds that aren't filled yet filled, and they'll be filled with strawberries and asparagus, I think I'm gonna still have a little bit of space left over. So my goal is to plant the rest of those beds with the ranunculus corms that I started in March. Those need to get outside pretty quickly because it's already so nice out, and they are a cool season crop as well. So I'm hoping to get those in the ground or in the raised beds this weekend or this week at minimum. So here's just kind of a wide angle shot of our new garden space. So this area here, if you can see my finger, this is actually two beds. I haven't put the wood chips to split them in half yet. So there's going to be a walkway along here, and same thing for this side. So there'll be a walkway along this side. Then we'll have the 4 raised beds in the middle with another little sitting area there. Then there's going to be 2 beds going the opposite direction from these two, and same thing there, 2 beds going in the opposite direction, and then the pattern repeats itself. So there'll be 2 beds going this way on the other side of the raised beds, which I haven't gotten to. As you can see, we're still slowly working on getting the wood chips in. So as you walk from the house towards the garden, we have the vegetable garden on the right side. And then to the left, we have kind of this random area. So the previous owners used this. There's like a little sand pit. So their grandkids played in the sand pit. There's a compost pile and just a bunch of like old like wood, but not wood that I could use for anything really. So most of this area we're gonna burn, or I shouldn't say area, we're gonna burn most of the stuff in this area. And then there are 3, you can see them there, 1, 2, 3 apple trees, and I'm not sure what kind of tree this one is. I'll have to wait for it to leaf out a little bit, but whatever this is, the bees have been absolutely loving it. So we just kind of want to get this area cleaned up and then maybe do some underplanting here with some like hostas and ferns, just to kind of make it a little bit more woodland and a lot less messy and just kind of junky looking. So this is one of our goals for this year, is to clean up this area. I'm actually going to take apart this compost that's there because the previous owner used like a chemical in it to help break everything down quicker. I don't know what that chemical is, and I don't know if it's organic or healthy or good to put onto my garden beds after. And I feel like the whole point of compost is to be able to recycle the materials that you have. So that's going to be broken down and kind of maybe spread out in this area. And the apple trees are ornamental apples, so not for human consumption, but the birds absolutely love it. So we'll spread out the compost, underplant this whole area, and then just kind of let it do its thing. So then if we keep walking a little bit further past the area that I just showed you, if I turn this way, there's a whole other garden bed here. I haven't actually measured this space, but it's probably like 40 by 30 feet, if I had to guess. And right now I have my greenhouse. This is the cattle panel greenhouse that I built at our previous house. We moved it here. I just was able to put the anchors in to be able to secure it to the ground, because I wanted to do that before we put the plastic on, because essentially this acts like a giant kite and I did not want it to fly anywhere. So I have to put the plastic on here still, and I'm hoping to do that this week as well to get this space usable, not only for all the seedlings that I have indoors right now, but also this is going to be the space where I plant my peppers this year, or that's the goal, is to have this greenhouse for peppers only, just so that I can extend the season and give them like a really hot space to grow and thrive. My peppers did really well in the greenhouse at our previous house last year, and I think they just preferred having that really, really hot heat and having a little bit more of a controlled space in terms of watering and heat. And yeah, they just did really well. So I'm gonna try to replicate that here again. The same issue with the clay soil is in this garden too, if not more so than our vegetable garden. This space does not seem to absorb water, or like it absorbs water, but it holds on to it so well. So this whole area is like quicksand right now. If I try to step in it, it is like walking in quicksand. My boots get stuck, I get stuck. It's kind of a little bit of a disaster. My whole goal for this area was to have this as like a little cottage garden with my greenhouse in the middle. I just envision it being a very beautiful space. But it's been so hard to work. None of the bulbs that I had planned to put here, I don't think any of them are going to do very well. So I'm kind of having to rethink this space. So if you have any ideas of things that really like heavy clay soil, or if you have any suggestions on how to amend clay soil, which I kind of have an idea of what to do, but for such a large space, I still need to kind of think about the logistics of that. But yeah, this is the plan for this area. I have planted a few wildflower seeds, but the space is so large that my packages didn't go very far. And I also have, I don't know if you can see, a couple of ranunculus corms planted along that little pathway there. Once again, don't know how well they're gonna do, but I figured I would try to put something in this space so that the weeds, which are already taking over, don't take over too much. So if I flip around again, one of my favorite parts of our new property is this lovely pond. I have always wanted a pond in my garden or in our yard, and I'm really excited that we have one now. So the previous owner dug this pond because the back area of this property actually floods quite a bit in the spring with the snow melt. So he dug this pond as a way to capture all that water. So it is fed by spring meltage or snow melting. So there's like no water input other than that. So the previous owner told us that it fills up quite a bit in the spring, and then over the summertime as the water evaporates, it does get a little bit lower. And when we moved in the fall, it was probably maybe 2 or 3 feet lower than it currently is. So it has filled up quite a bit. And as you can hear, hopefully you can hear that, there are tons of frogs. So let's go take a walk over there. So there's a red-winged blackbird here. Lots of wildlife have been coming by. I think the red-winged blackbirds are starting to nest, so we'll see how defensive they become in a second here. So I came out here last night with my mom, and most of the tadpoles had hatched and swam away, but you might be able to see there that there's some tadpoles. But I'll put up a really cool video that I took the other day of all the eggs and all the tadpoles as they hatched out. So this is where we have our bees. It's just on the other side of the pond. All of the bees unfortunately died when we moved in the fall, so I don't have bees right now. And I don't think I'm gonna get any this summer either, just because building the whole new garden, potentially 2 gardens, getting the greenhouse all set up, all of that is taking a lot of time this spring. And if I wanted to install a new hive, I'd essentially have to do it in the next few weeks. So it's just too much for this year, but next year we'll definitely have bees again because I already miss them. Luckily, I've seen tons of honeybees in the area. It actually looks like there's an apiary not too far from us. So I might put up a swarm trap to see if I can catch any of their bees that are swarming, and then that way I don't have to pay for a new nuke this, or I guess next spring. But we'll see if I get to that this summer. But free bees are free bees, so it'd be great. So yeah, once again, just to orient you, you have the pond here, and then if you go around here, this is where the bees are. The previous owner, like I said, told us that this back area floods in the spring, which you can kind of see there's a little bit of water, standing water still. And we originally had the bees there near that pallet, but he came over after we moved in and he's like, I think you should move them here just because it's a higher area and does not get wet during the spring melt. So that was really good advice. If you're moving and you're able to talk to the previous owner about these kind of things, it's very helpful. So now this is the back area of the property, and our goal for this area is to have a little bit of an orchard. So we have an apple and a cherry tree coming this year. Obviously there's a lot of big purchases, so we couldn't go full orchard on our first year, but we have an apple and a cherry tree coming, and we're planning on planting them in this back area here. We also have about 36 1 to 2 year old trees that are coming as well to kind of fill up these gaps in the back tree line on this side of the house and on the other side, which I can show you in a second. But we have some weeping willows, one of which will go on the side of the pond, which I think will look really beautiful once it grows a little bit bigger. And then we'll put one in this back corner too, where it's still kind of wet, because willows like damp soil, or they don't mind being in wet soil. We also ordered some spruce trees, a couple maples, some more different types of willows that are native to Manitoba, and I think that might be it. But yeah, we're basically wanting to fill up as much of this back space as we can. So we will plant some trees along the tree line just to give us a little bit more privacy. I don't think we'll have time to do it this year, but I've been seeing a bunch of videos of where they take the willow branches and make like a privacy screen, which they kind of weave together, and then as it grows, it creates like this really thick, dense privacy screen. I'd love to do that. I haven't tried to find where I can find the willow branches that are being propagated, but if I'm able to, and if I have time, I think that would be really cool along here, just to create a little bit of a privacy screen and then plant the trees in front of it so we can still enjoy the trees, if that makes sense. But a lot of ideas for the first year, which I don't know if they'll actually happen for us. You know, time and money are obviously limits when you just move into a new place. So this is the view from the back of the pond. So vegetable garden there, that's our shed, greenhouse. And you can kind of see, so this is where the water line is now, and where those cattails are is where the water line was in the fall. So it has filled up quite a bit, which is really nice. Like, it's a very beautiful big pond. Would I ever swim in it? I don't think so. I've seen too much goose poop, and there's no aeration of the pond. So I don't know if I would swim in it, but it is a really beautiful space. So I think right here, kind of where the pond dips out, I think that's where we're going to plant one of the weeping willows. It's in a position where even if it gets really big, it's not going to shade out the garden. And I think it'll be a really nice focal point to the pond. I also would love to plant some like lilies and stuff in the pond, but I also don't want to mess with the ecosystem of it. Even though it's a man-made pond, it's been here for 30 years and it's kind of been doing its thing. As you can see and hear, there's lots of wildlife. So I don't know if I really want to mess with it that much, but how pretty would it be if we had some lilies in the pond? So now I'm just walking on the other side of the pond here. So here's just the other side of the garden space with the greenhouse. There's lots of weeds. These weeds are already flowering, so I'm pretty screwed. I need to like pick all of those out before they actually go to seed, but I don't think I'm going to end up getting to it. So this area is probably going to be overrun with weeds this year, but I can't do everything in a year, or I can't do everything at the same time. So I'm giving myself a little bit of grace to just let this area get weedy. I'm sure there'll be pollinators that love whatever flower this is. So I'm just gonna let that happen for now and maybe deal with that in the fall. Maybe give this whole area a little till and then start fresh next year. I can't do everything in one year. So then here, we're also going to be using some of those trees that we're buying to thicken up this area. The previous owner didn't want to plant any trees here because he was afraid that it would shade out the garden. And I'm not too worried about it because even if you look down there, those trees are super tall and the shadow basically goes to where I'm standing. So I don't think I have to worry that much. This area will get full sun even if those trees in 15, 20 years get really large. So you might hear a lot of gardeners say to like observe a new garden for a year before you plant anything or make any plans. And I totally agree that that is obviously the best thing that you can do. But gardeners are impatient. Like there was no way I was just going to observe this garden for the first year and not plant anything or do anything. But I understand why they said that or why they say that, and I'll show you why. So in the fall, I knew that this area back there was going to be my vegetable garden, but I didn't know where I was going to have all of the garden beds, if I was going to have raised beds, any of that. So in the fall, when I wanted to plant my garlic, I decided to plant it in this garden. And you can see some of it starting to come up. There are about 100 bulbs in here, and I think I only see maybe 10. So my lesson is that I should have observed this area for a year because this garden space, like I said earlier, is so bogged down. It is so wet. It is so heavy in clay that I don't know how well these garlic are going to do. I'm hopeful that I see some garlic sprouting, but I don't know how well they're going to do because the soil is so heavy in clay and so wet. Like even up to earlier this week, this area had standing water right where my garlic is. So obviously it's not the best place to have planted my garlic, but I was too impatient to wait a year. And I obviously wanted garlic for this year because it's one of the easiest and, best things to grow in the garden. So that's a lesson learned. I will not be planting garlic here again. And I'm going to see how the rest of the year goes to decide where I'm going to plant it next year. But yeah, that's a lesson. Try to observe as much as you can, or maybe even get your soil tested before you plant things, or ask the previous owner if they know, like, does this area have standing water in it? Because then you know roughly or have an idea of what you should or shouldn't plant in that area. But anyways, there is garlic growing. It looks pretty good. We'll see how these bulbs look in the summer when I harvest them, but it is what it is. If I lose a batch of garlic this summer, it's not the worst thing in the world, but definitely an important lesson or a valuable lesson to learn. So this is just the other side of this middle area with the apple trees in it. And I actually forgot to show you something, so I'm gonna come back this way. I forgot to show you one area of the garden, so I'm just gonna walk back this way so I can show you our raspberry patch, which I definitely need to do something with in the next week or so. So back at the garden, the vegetable garden bed or area. So 4 raised beds, you can see the areas that I showed you earlier. And then over here, it's mostly grass at the moment, but there are some rhubarb plants growing at the end here. So there's some rhubarb growing there. There's some more there, but this area definitely needs to be cleaned up. I'm not sure if I want to till it and just start fresh, but it's definitely not in an ideal state because there's a lot of grass, and I'm thinking the previous owner told me that it was quackgrass. You can see quite a bit of it growing through the wood chips already. So this area needs to be cleaned up. But the area that I wanted to show you was this raspberry patch here. So this whole area here are all raspberries, and if I walk around this way, you'll be able to see that it's a decent sized patch of raspberries, but it's getting a little unruly. So raspberry patches in general should only be about 2 feet at max wide, and this is probably like 4 feet, if not more. And then a lot of the raspberries are growing into the garden bed. So I need to prune all of this in the next week. It's one of my goals. So my goal is to prune this whole raspberry patch down. I'm not sure if these are floricane or primicane raspberries, which obviously will determine how you prune them. But based on the fact that all of these branches, when you like break them, they're all dead, I'm assuming that all the raspberries, or most of them here, are primicane raspberries. So that means I can cut them all back, and there are little raspberries that are like little raspberry canes that are starting to grow now. So I'm gonna cut everything back like to the ground and see what grows this year, and then eventually put up a raspberry trellis so that harvesting the raspberries becomes a little bit easier. But first thing on the agenda to do is to basically cut this whole patch down to the ground and just let whatever comes up comes up. I also have some raspberry plants that are coming, some golden raspberries, because this whole patch is red raspberries. And if you've ever had golden raspberries, you know that they are like the superior raspberry. So I have about 5 raspberry plants that are coming that I'll also plant within this patch. I might actually plant them closer to where the rhubarb is and maybe just like till that area and get rid of the rhubarb. Haven't decided yet. I love rhubarb, but I don't know if I want it. It would be nice if this whole row was just all raspberries. It would make it, 1, easier to prune, 2, easier to harvest. It's just like all in one spot. So yeah, I gotta cut all this back down, potentially till the rhubarb area, and then plant the raspberry plants that I have coming. I also have, for this back area here, which you can't really make out right now, you can kind of see where I have posts that delineate the paths and beds. I'm gonna have a Arctic kiwi, I think it is. One of the hardy kiwis for zone 3 will be planted back here. And then I also have haskaps that are coming, which will also be in one of the beds in this back area. I figured I have 1 or 2 beds that are kind of designated for perennials. It just makes it easier. I know that I'm not gonna like be tilling or, you know, doing anything major to those beds. So yeah, that is what I have planned. So I wanted to show you the raspberry patch because I will be filming a how to prune raspberry video probably today and try to post it after or before I post this video. All right, so that's basically all I had for you. I hope you have a better idea of our new garden space. We don't have too much going on in our zone 3 garden at the moment, but hopefully this space will be filled with plants soon. We're about 3 weeks away from our last frost date, so soon this whole place will be planted, which I'm very excited for. But anyways, I hope you have a great week in the garden. Happy planting, and I will see you next time.